everyone. My name is Cooler Heads Prevail, and today I'm going to be starting a four-part series on how to track your personal spending and saving habits, and hopefully provide insight on how to improve the two. The first section here is going to be called Find Your Motivation for Saving, and this is probably one of the most important steps. If you want to save effectively, you need to find a source of motivation to help sustain that saving mentality. And I've broken this down into three sections. The first one is to think of something you want to do or you just want in life. The second is to determine any short-term or long-term goals you have or a combination of the two. Short-term typically refers to something more like up to a month. More long-term goals can be upwards to a decade in length. The third point is to break down these goals into manageable steps, and this is to take away any anxiety that comes with having steps that are too overbearing and you don't feel like you can accomplish them. And breaking them down into more manageable bite-sized bits will help maintain that motivation for you. The second step is called track your spending, and this is also broken down into three sections. The first section is to create or download a template to keep track of your monthly spending. Now, this is something you're going to want to do every month, and it's a great way to create a baseline of what your spending habits are and how you can improve on them. And as you continue over the months, you can compare your spending habits to where you initially started and see your progress that way. Second subsection is to update the template on a regular basis. In my personal experience, I like to update my spending tracking habits twice a month. It's not too frequent that it's getting in the way of your daily life, but it gives you that midpoint where you can look and reflect on your own spending for the month. Say you have any irregular expenses that you need to compensate for, and you can look at those and say, I've been spending too much in this section, so I really need to cut back for the remainder of the month, and you can keep that in mind. The third and final step for section 2 is called Reflect on Your Progress. Now, this section is basically to maintain that sense of motivation to look at your progress at the end of each month and think, I've either improved in this way or maybe I'm even slacking in one of the sections and I need to sort of up my game on my savings in that regard. The third section is called Determine How You Want to Invest Your Savings. This is also broken down into three subsections. The main point to take away from this is that inflation reduces the value of the money that you save if it's not invested in growing in something. And this is more for long-term goal savings. If you want to put something away for a while, there's many different ways to invest this uh, savings amount that you have, and I can go more into detail about that in the more in-depth section of the video series. The second subsection is decide what you want to invest in and what your investments are going to be doing for you. Now, this can also be tied to what your motivation is for savings. If you want something more liquid, liquid referring to you have easy access to it because you know you want something. Um, Typically, liquid savings will have a lower amount of return, but it's more easy to cash out if you need it abruptly. If you want something more like a passive income, so say for example, you want your investment to essentially become a second or third source of income for you, that would be more geared towards dividend stocks that pay out a cash amount value, and that's something that you can take away from your savings on a regular basis. This is a much longer term goal where ultimately maybe you have a set amount of money in mind that you want to invest, and you're expecting a certain percentage amount to be paid out. So, say for example, you know you want to put away $1 million, and you want dividend cash payouts of, say for example, $50,000 a year. So that would be a very long-term investment, obviously, because you're not going to save $1 million overnight, but it creates essentially its own paycheck in the long run. The third point is to always set aside easy access money for emergencies, and this is essentially your emergency savings fund. Typically, what they recommend online and through various sources is you save around 3 to 6 months worth of your spending needs, not your salary or your income. The reason behind that is you only need to cover your bare expenses, and that can be things such as rent, food, maybe car maintenance, things like that. The fourth and final point is also an important point to keep in mind at all times, which is don't save at the expense of your happiness. And this is also broken down into three sections. The first point is to leave spending money for yourself on a regular basis to buy what you want. As important as savings are, if you have purely long-term goals in mind, you can lose track of that motivation very easily where you're putting every penny towards achieving that long-term goal at the expense of your happiness today or tomorrow. You still want to leave enough money for yourself where you have that flexibility to have your own entertainment on a regular basis. The second point is don't avoid going out. Instead, find cheaper alternatives. And that's just a very basic way of saying, your daily spending, whether you're going out with friends, going to events, anything really that makes you happy. Um, don't avoid those things. Like, again, you don't want to sacrifice your happiness um, for the sake of achieving this goal. Just find cheaper alternatives, maybe. Like, let's say your friends like going out to a bar, getting drunk, anything like that. There's probably cheaper venues that you can find in your location. Very simple things that'll save you maybe $10 here and there, but will ultimately save you a lot in the long run. The third and final point is that time is more precious than money, and you shouldn't be sacrificing time for money. And what this will be expanded on in the fourth part of the series. But ultimately, it's things like, if you work a 60-hour work week consistently at a high-paying job, of course you'll get closer to your financial goals much faster. But is it a job that you enjoy doing? Um, so if you're much happier at working 40 hours a week, maybe even making half the money, you can still be working towards your goal. It will take longer, but ultimately your happiness and your health will be intact, and you'll have the long-term motivation to keep those goals. So once again, my name is Cooler Heads Prevail, and I will be starting this series very shortly, and I look forward to hearing feedback and any additional information you guys would like to see.